Go ahead, Manuela, you start.
I'm Manuela Ambrosino, Executive Director of Partnerships for Lumen Learning.
And I'm Jamison Miller. I am the Director of Research Communication for Lumen Learning. And I also have, want to make available to all of you in the chat the link to this slide deck so that you've got it, you can follow along as you see fit. So for the 20 minutes that we have your attention for, we're going to try and touch basically on these 4 points. I'll jump in and give everyone just a brief history of Lumen Learning, and then review our 2 basic courseware offerings, as well as our continuous improvement process that we take quite seriously. And then I'll shift things over to Manuela, who will describe our professional development offerings that go with our courses and our courseware. And then we'll hopefully have a little bit of time if there's any questions from you at this point. Okay. So, oops. It's not cooperating. There it goes. So about 12 years ago, the co-founders of Lumen got together on their first project prior to Lumen. That was Kim Thanos and David Wiley, and some others received a grant from the Gates Foundation that was targeting improving outcomes for at-risk students by helping faculty to adopt open content for all the benefits of OER. I'm sure this group is well aware of. And in that process, a lot of lessons were learned about how to support faculty adoption to OER, and we're working with 8 partner institutions in that project. Then a couple of years later, Lumen got a second grant from the Gates Foundation, along with some funding from the Shuttleworth Foundation, to actually form Lumen, with the idea of really trying to scale and sustain the potential impacts of OER. So currently, Lumen is still partially owned by a charitable foundation, and we are still focused on improving outcomes for racially minoritized and low-income students. And using OER is definitely a cornerstone of our approach. And Lumen releases all of our learning resources that we create under a CC BY license for everyone to use. So we've really kind of taken this approach in the last few years that while we do want to focus on students and success in their work, we also recognize the importance of supporting faculty in being the most impactful teachers that they can be. So it's really these 2 sides of the coin that we've really started to concentrate on. So I'll begin here by talking about our courseware offerings, and then Manuela will shift to the professional development side. So Waymaker is our flagship courseware, and this courseware, the way that comes to your faculty is you get a cartridge that you can install and import into your LMS. So we support Blackboard and Canvas, Brightspace, and Moodle. So any of those can be used, and then the students will enter and see the content and all the activities and assessments right within the LMS. There's no need to go to another sign-in anywhere else. It's all right in the LMS that they're already using for all their courses. And once that cartridge is imported, the instructors can customize using all the tools that they use in their LMS, move things around, eliminate content that they don't want to cover, bring in examples or assignments that they do use on a regular basis. And then this is supported by a personalized study plan for the students. So as they work the materials, it'll give them little nudges and tips about where to spend their time and effort in studying. We also have some automated messaging tools to begin to facilitate the relationship between an instructor and a student. And then there's a set of analytics that are available to the instructor to see how their students are doing and target their lessons accordingly. And this courseware is $25 per student per term. We also have our online homework manager, our OHM, which is specifically to support quantitative courses with thousands upon thousands of mathematical questions and question banks for students to be able to practice for various math courses. So they We have algorithmic assessments so that students can try them again and again, and it'll change the values so they can really work on them. Huge question libraries, and then we've got template courses that are fully customizable as well. Really easy to set up, and it comes with an embedded Desmos interactive graphing and calculators. This one's also $25 per student per term. So between these two courseware, those that support the quantitative and those that support the other courses and other content, we've got a good amount of coverage for OER courses. I want to highlight our really excellent record of customer support and kind of the point and the value that comes to the instructor and the students is that, you know, we're always here, we're always available to support when there's any kind of technical issues and problems. And we've got an amazing record of uptime for Waymaker, OHM, and our Circles platform. Our median response time is under half an hour. I'm impressed with that. You know, this amazing customer support satisfaction rating. So your faculty that would use ours would be use our courseware would be highly supported in addition to your local institutional support. Now I want to shift briefly to the part that's near and dear to my heart is how we're using data and analyzing where our OER is being effective and where it's not, and using that as a way to target our improvements. So our courses are constantly in a state of revision and adjusting to, you know, when we identify problems, but also when political climates shift or when we find things are being ineffective, you know, we target those to make improvements. So we're able to kind of map all the outcomes in the course. And because the course is all the assessments and the instructional materials are kind of linked in the background through these aligned with these course outcomes, we can say like, oh, okay, you know, if we look here, these are where students are engaging with the content. We can see that they're actually opening and working and reading it, but they're doing really poorly on the assessments. So this is where we want to target, because obviously the more that the students are studying, the better they should be doing if it's being effective. So we evaluate these outcomes, we go in and we make changes to the OER content based on these, and then we're able to deploy A/B testing to see if the changes we made are actually improvements. So let me give you some examples of some of the 3 examples of some of the improvements that we make. So here's a kind of before after. You know, on the left is the original OER content. I believe this is in our sociology course, where this concept of scientific management is introduced, right, by, or Taylorism. And this was an area where students were struggling, not catching on to what that topic was. So we embedded a practice question that's, you know, low stakes. It's not actually for points. It's to give the students an opportunity right after they've been introduced to this new topic to try with a practice question and get some immediate feedback, whether they get it right or get it wrong, to support their learning along the way. Another example that's even more deeply interactive than a question with feedback is this one here from an economics course. And this one, students are introduced to the topic of price ceilings. And on the left here, it's actually trying to represent a 4-stage process in a single graph. And a lot of students were finding this confusing, which of the arcs and which came first, so on and so forth. So our team broke this graph apart and layered it into what you see here on the right, that's embedded right with this text. And here students have the opportunity to see, oh, okay, these are the different portions of the graph. This is what happens next. And then they're able to actually take a guess at, you know, what am I looking at here? What effect is this, the demand, the supply, whatnot? And again, get that immediate feedback. In our quantitative courses, here's an example from OHM, where again, instead of trying to, represent this graph here just with repeated lines and kind of a stale, kind of, you know, just a stagnant still image, again, made it possible through our partnership with Desmos and embedding these interactive graphs. Students can now see a function And then they can actually make adjustments to the variables on a slider scale, and they can start to understand how this is being represented in the graph. Again, giving students a chance to actually get in there and try and do things in the course. So those are some of the examples of improvements that we do and just the highlights of our courseware. Now I'll hand it over to Manuela to talk a little bit about the professional development we offer.
Thanks, Jamison. Hi, Manuela again. So I work with faculty predominantly that are going to be interacting with our Lumen Circles or institutions that have adopted Lumen Circles. And why we want to talk about it today is specifically around our OER, teaching with OER pedagogy circle, which is, again, professional development opportunities for any faculty that is either has developed OER materials or are going to be teaching with OER. So this gives an opportunity for faculty to interact within their community of practice and their peers in their discipline to not only learn about how to use these materials, but also using a teaching practice framework that has been researched and how to make this the most effective practice to then turn into your student success, right? So our goal really with Lumen Circles is impacting the teacher. While it's not teaching them anything new, it's building on what they may already come in with in strengths, but looking at different tags and frameworks to bring in that that practice into their classroom and to engage students effectively. Next slide, Jamison, sorry. So a little bit about Lumen Circles. As I mentioned, it is a community of practice. It's a virtual platform that can be used by anyone. This doesn't have to be necessarily someone that has adopted Lumen materials. It is agnostic in that term, but again, that is looking to use OER or has developed their own OER. They're going to explore this evidence-based teaching framework around that theme, connect with their peers in the virtual community that also are in that same track as well. So typically we get institutions that either received an OER grant or are transitioning to OER for their institution, and then being able to come together, reflect, share, and deepen that impact. The circles are about 10 to 12 faculty with a facilitator who has either has a strong background in OER or who has been trained on the methodology. So the outcomes are to design learning activities that align with teaching with OER and that OER open pedagogy, applying assessment techniques to measure student learning, develop plans of teaching enhancement, analyze and use those instructional practices, and then being able to come back, engage with their community, reflect and share. The evidence-based teaching practice framework is going to be based off of these pillars. What we call our pillars is going to be to create a supportive, challenging, varied, organized, and a place where students feel that they belong and are represented in the classroom. This is a typical structure of what you'll see a Lumen Circle Fellow go through in our OER circle. They're going to focus on creating that supportive and varied environment where they're going to be exploring how to create that environment, persist, how they're going to use those OER materials to help engage students. They're going to explore materials that support success for all students to feel that they seem as respected and represented in the classroom, what we like to call creative brave space and pedagogical partnerships as well, and create organized materials that create an organized and challenging environment for your students. So they're going to be collaborating, create active learning. Oh, I lost my slides. There we go. Thanks. And then at the end of their fellowship, it is a 9-week fellowship, they're going to come back, reflect on their practices, share, deepen that impact, the goal, revisit their goals as to why they came into a fellowship, and then what they would like to take moving forward. We do find that faculty that go through our OER fellowship is that they may take one piece, start with something small and then build on it over time. So it's not necessarily changing how they're teaching, but focusing on these areas to make that impact with the using openly licensed content. Benefits are obviously expanding their knowledge, expanding their network, building confidence teaching and teaching with OER, asking questions. This may be a new area for some faculty that have either, they've been asked to use these materials or they are developing their own materials, sharing that experience, trying new teaching practices, and being able to receive that feedback and guidance from their peers. And thank you.
Great, thank you guys so much. I want to see if we have any questions from our folks. No, looks like we don't. Thank you, guys did a good job, very comprehensive. Jamison, I really appreciate showing sort of how you've taken some of the more static OER materials that are out there and really taken advantage of the ability to use courseware and interactives to make a more engaging class. So thank you for showing us those examples.
I guess that does one question I do have in mind. So James, if you guys didn't have any assessment there before, how did you know that that was the area they had the high level of engagement but poor performance? I guess is what I was curious about now that Annika did ask that.
Sure. So that was an example of what we call like a practice assessment. And those kind of things are embedded in the text and there's no points related to those. So while they're aligned to the outcome, we don't actually look at the data coming out of those. We look at the summative quiz. So there's a quiz at the end of each module that then is also associated with those pages. So that's how we're able to identify it. Yeah, great question. And for those that are interested in the data side of things, we're increasingly now offering some workshops, with institutions that are interested, where we can collect the data from how your students were doing, and we can kind of create this custom dashboard where you can see all the outcomes and what's going on there. And we actually run a workshop with your faculty to see if they have suggestions, because they know your student population. We take those suggestions as well to make improvements. So those are being offered at no cost. It's just as a way to kind of help foster a relationship with faculty too.
Great, thanks. And then there's a question for you in the chat from Hillary in Wisconsin. She's wondering if you have any plans to expand your content to more career and technical education courses.
So I would love to say yes. Our goal really, and part of, there is a cost attached to what we do and the support that we provide faculty. And with that said, we really are mindful about the materials that we are either developing or creating. So predominantly it's going to be your larger general education courses. We do keep adding courses, but we're taking that lens view of how much is it going to cost students more. Our goal is to continue to keep that cost down for students. There may be at one point, but I would say right now our focus is those larger enrolled general education courses.
Thank you.